Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Maria Ott, and I am honored to hold the Melbo Chair in Education Administration. And welcome to our fourth Melbo Lecture titled Bringing Equal Educational Opportunity to Life for Students Today, not in the future, but today. This lecture is focused on leadership and continues the legacy of Dean Irving R. Melbo, who was Dean of the School of Education from 1953 to 1973. And it's my honor to introduce some of our distinguished guests. Let me begin with the Board of Counselors who support our Dean and our school. If you would wave or stand, thank you. And let me introduce the granddaughter of the Melbos, Laura Tyndall Wagner. Thank you for being here, Laura. And I'd like Melissa Moore and Catherine Kawaguchi to stand up. They lead our Virginia Archer Melbo networking events and the Women of DSAG sessions to promote women in leadership, honoring the legacy of Virginia Archer Melbo. It is my pleasure also to acknowledge the wonderful faculty and DSAG members that I have the pleasure of working with. I appreciate you being here, and if you wouldn't mind standing, faculty and DSAG members, appreciate you coming and supporting this event. So this lecture builds on the leadership legacy of Dean Irving R. Melbo. He was a trailblazer who understood that USC School of Education could be a leader for California and the nation. Let's hear about his legacy. We have a short video to share.
The Melbo Lecture Series is important both to honor and remember Melbo and his work, but also to continue that work.
Dean Melbo had a vision for the School of Education that we're living today. That vision that he had for being a school that produces great leaders that serve throughout the state and throughout the nation, really.
Irving was a person who established a strong program for practitioners.
We often take great pride at Rossier that we produce so many educational leaders, and that's due to the legacy of Melbo.
My grandmother Virginia and my grandpa Irving were really wonderful people. They spent a lot of time investing themselves into other people. This lecture is really exciting for us. It's something that is visible and tangible.
I mean, we're at this point right now in education where we've come from a very static way of operating our systems to being totally disrupted. The lecture series is important because it gives us an opportunity to come together and to talk about really important topics, sharing expertise, sharing ideas, sharing possibilities.
These are very difficult times for educational leaders. We prepare the next generation of leaders by being in touch with the challenges facing leaders.
I'm hoping that with the title of the lecture, carrying his name, the two Melbos, that people will realize that we're growing from the roots of our past and growing to a new future.
Just gathering together to hear a panel of speakers is such a delight after everything that we've been through. So it's an exciting new chapter for all of us, and we're so proud and honored to be part of it. I think they would be really honored that their legacy is a part of this story that continues to change and adapt.
I have loved being an educator my entire career. I get energy from this next generation of educators that are really shaping what we'll be as we go forward.
We're really proud that we continue to produce leaders who are out there on the front lines of education, making a difference, sometimes in very underserved communities, but often with the vision and the resourcefulness to really do great work.
So building on Dean Melbo's legacy, let's set the tone for today's lecture. Melbo laid the early foundations for this incredible school of education that we call the home of Trojan leaders. USC Rossier proudly acknowledges the largest group of superintendents affiliated with a university in California, and this honor is spreading to other states through our Rossier Urban Superintendents Academy that enrolls participants from across the United States. As leaders, we are committed to building the relationships that promote a caring society that values all individuals and commits to equal access and opportunity for those not fully served by educational and societal systems. Change has become our new normal, and we are learning how to navigate in waters filled with uncertainty. How do we tap into this time of change to solidify our commitment to equity and opportunity for all our youth? One area of leadership preparation is knowing the what of our work that enables us to stand firm for our students and lead with our why. Leaders need to know and understand what is in the law so they can use knowledge to advance our why. Knowledge is power, and it is our hope that you leave today strengthened by the knowledge you will gain from the keynote speaker and our panelists. I am excited to feature educational leaders who are unafraid to stand up for their students and communities and use their positions and power to confront inequities and to do everything needed to challenge what is unacceptable. They are advancing opportunity for those marginalized by historical actions. We have a distinguished keynote speaker and a panel of experts who will share their wisdom and advice to support our theme of bringing educational opportunity to life for students today, and to give you tools to use in your leadership roles. The complete bios of our speakers can be found in the QR code on your tables, but let me note that we will have a reception following this lecture so that you'll have an opportunity to network with each other, but also to network with the speakers. I'm going to introduce first our panelists and the dean, and then I will introduce our keynote speaker. So let me ask them to stand when I introduce them. Carla Estrada has dedicated over 25 years to advancing educational excellence and opportunities for students. A proud graduate of the Los Angeles Unified School District, she now serves as the Deputy Superintendent of Instruction, leading a team focused on achieving educational outcomes for over 460,000 diverse students in the Los Angeles community. Wow. Carla's journey is both inspiring and personal. As the daughter of immigrants and a graduate of an alternative education program who once experienced homelessness herself, she understands the transformative power of education. Her experiences have fueled her deep-rooted belief that every student can achieve greatness when given the right opportunities. Thank you for being here. Guadalupe Guerrero is Chief Executive Officer of the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. The Partnership is a nonprofit organization that provides direct support to a network of 20 high-needs school communities located in Watts, South Los Angeles, and Boyle Heights, and supports 40 additional schools throughout LAUSD with teacher training and curriculum implementation. Guadalupe has over 30 years of experience improving the quality of education in urban public schools. He holds degrees from both UCLA and Harvard, and his professional experiences include Spanish, bilingual elementary classroom teacher, something close to my heart, school principal, and central office administrator in the Boston and San Francisco public schools. Most recently, he served as superintendent of the Portland Public Schools, the largest school district in Oregon. Pedro Noguera, our facilitator, did you stand, by the way, so they could see you? Pedro Noguera, our facilitator today, is the Emery Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of the Rossier School of Education and a distinguished professor of education at the University of Southern California. In addition, he is the best school of education dean in the entire nation. And that is a fact, okay? That is a fact. A sociologist, Noguera's research focuses on the ways in which schools are influenced by social and economic conditions, as well as by demographic trends in local, regional, and global contexts. He is the author of 15 books. His most recent books are Common Schooling, Conversations about the Tough Questions and Complex Issues Facing K-12 Education in the United States Today. That book was a winner of the Association of American Publishers 2022 Prose Award, and he wrote that with Rick Hess. And then his other book that I want to mention is City Schools and the American Dream, Still Pursuing the Dream. So I'm so delighted he's going to facilitate the conversation. And now our keynote speaker, Kimberly Jenkins Robinson, the founding director. Thank you. The founding director of the Education Rights Institute at the University of Virginia School of Law. She also serves as a professor at both the School of Education and Human Development and the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. She is one of the nation's leading education law and policy experts about equal education opportunity, education and democracy, civil rights, and education federalism. Robinson won the 2023-24 All-University Teaching Award at the University of Virginia. Proud of you for that. We educators love that. The Education Rights Institute advances equal educational opportunity by bringing together research, law, policy, and practice across the disciplines and by engaging policymakers. Again, please know that the full bios are in your QR codes, so take the time to get to know these amazing leaders. Now it's my honor to invite Kimberly Jenkins Robinson to the podium. Join me in giving her a warm Trojan welcome.
Good evening. All right, let's try it one more time. Good evening. All right, okay, so we're awake. I know it's 4 in the afternoon, so I'm gonna make sure to keep it lively for all of you to, you'll be like, I'm so glad I came when you're done, right? So first I have to thank Dean Negreira and Professor Ott for inviting me to deliver the Melbo lecture. I was honored to learn more about him, and it seems like he has an amazing legacy, so I'm just really excited to be here with all of you. But really, what I'm excited about is I'm outside of law school, and I'm talking with educators and those who are working on the ground in schools. And the entire reason that I founded the Education Rights Institute was to reach exactly this audience, which is to help to make law and policy actionable in a way that impacted the educational opportunities and the quality of education that students receive across the country. So I'll talk more about the Education Rights Institute toward the end of my remarks, but I just want to say how happy I am to be talking with all of you today and to share some insights about law and policy and also to answer your questions as well. So I've titled my remarks, Bringing Equal Educational Opportunity to Life for Students Today, and I'm going to answer 3 questions. So first, why should equal educational opportunity be our aim for education? Some of you might think, that's actually the wrong aim. We should be focusing on something else. Some of you might think, of course, that's the aim for education. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I focus on that particular goal. Second, how can we bring this robust vision of equal educational opportunity to life for our students? So as you'll see, equal educational opportunity has been a bedrock principle of our nation for some time, but it's one that has never been fully implemented and made into a reality. And so I'm going to talk about that and how we can change that for our students today. And then finally, what role should educators, staff, district leaders play in this work? So I'm really excited to just dive right in. So first question, why should equal educational opportunity be our aim? So one of the reasons that I will focus on my remarks and why I believe that equal educational opportunity should be our aim for schools, and I will define those terms in just a minute, but I draw first on some bedrock court cases because I believe that it's very important that we have legal grounding for the work that we are doing. Why do I believe that? One of the things that is important about the law is it helps establish establish norms and principles that can guide and shape our school systems. So California was very much a leader of this in the Mendez case. Even before Brown versus Board of Education, the federal courts in California recognized that segregation of students on the basis of race was in violation of the United States Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. And so it's important to really focus on this principle, in part because we all know that we are living in a deeply polarized time in our nation. However, when we hearken back to first principles, I believe that we can get to some common ground on at least what our aims are, and then we start to discuss how we can advance those aims. So that's one of the reasons for that. We also see this idea of equal educational opportunity in the Brown case in 1954. So the key question, and the reason why that's important is the key question in Brown was all about, does this separation of students on the basis of race deny students equal educational opportunity? Why is that relevant? It's relevant because it's clear that the court is saying that the 14th Amendment guarantees equal educational opportunity. And then the court says, surely this division on the basis of race, even if the facilities are equal, does deny equal educational opportunity. The court then further goes on to say that education, when the state decides to provide it, is a right that must be provided to all on equal terms. Now, lawyers eventually sought to take the court at its word on that in a case called San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez. And in that case, the Supreme Court actually rolled back the language, or sort of did not agree with what we call dicta in the court, which is that it was not the central ruling of the case in Brown. And the court said, no, education is not among the rights protected by the United States Constitution, neither explicitly nor implicitly. However, even though education itself is not recognized by the US Constitution as a fundamental right, I do believe that we should still hearken back to that 14th Amendment equal educational opportunity principle, in part because that principle still remains the law today and the court's understanding of what the 14th Amendment requires. And so having that sort of grounding in what we're trying to do gives us a stronger foundation in law and in reform than kind of shifting tides and sort of agenda that can change over time. So this is a really bedrock principle that I believe can ground our work and sort of bring people together. Second, I focus on it because it makes clear that everyone is entitled to a high quality education, not just particular students. Today, we see deeply divided schools in which many students who are either wealthier, who live in particular geographic locations or particular racial backgrounds, those students will get a vastly higher quality education than other students who might live in a rural area, who might live in a particular urban area. And so it's important to understand that equal educational opportunity provides a really unifying kind of banner for people to unite behind, along with that constitutional foundation. So as I noted as I began, we have never fully brought equal educational opportunity to life. While we recognize it as a legal principle, it does not really have, it's not been fully implemented in our schools. And what's important to understand about that is that I believe that we can reclaim equal educational opportunity by identifying it and tying it to two things. One, it's often understood to mean that that discrimination of various types is prohibited. So that might be race, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, all of these things. So equal educational opportunity is often associated with non-discrimination. But I would argue if we only have equal educational opportunity mean that you can't be discriminated against, it's a pretty hollow legal principle, because discriminate against in what? What are you receiving? What are you entitled to? And so I believe that equal educational opportunity also should include a substantive component where students graduate college ready, career ready, and engaged civic participants. I say that because if you have equal opportunity to receive a low quality education, what have you gained, right? Equal educational opportunity means very little if we cannot have some common understanding of what it is that students have an equal opportunity to receive. And so I believe that college and career readiness and engaged civic participants are critical elements that we should also be holding our schools, our districts, and our states to when we think about what does equal educational opportunity mean. All right, so let's talk about how can we bring this vision, this more robust vision of equal educational opportunity to life, right? And so part of what I've identified is we have two things that we're aiming for. We have the non-discrimination principle, and then we have the aims of education included under equal educational opportunity. So the question is, how can we bring this to life? There's a couple of ways that I wanted to focus on for the audience today. First, we need to understand what Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 says. Now, why do I say that? One of the reasons why I open the Education Rights Institute and focus on Title VI is because Title VI in many ways had started to gather dust on the shelves in a lot of places and was not something that people understood really what Title VI means. It's not something, you might have, for example, one school law class about it as you're pursuing a degree in education, or you might be told about it like on our first day, it's like, we don't discriminate in the district, and then it's sort of, we've checked the box and we move on. And one of the things that I want to move the law and policy from and to is from this notion of compliance into this notion of implementation. So compliance is, I used to represent school districts, so I worked alongside districts, and one of the reasons I work to partner with school districts rather than sue districts. I know a lot of lawyers sue districts, and that's fine. But what I do, sorry, I shouldn't say that's fine. Sorry. But it does happen. We know this, right? Some districts actually need to be sued, I'm going to be honest. All right. So, but what I'm saying is I work to come alongside school districts, in part because I used to represent school districts. And every single school district administrator that I met cared about students. They wanted to do the best for students. And the reason why we don't engage in litigation at the Institute is in part because litigation causes this defensive posture. It says, okay, you and I are on opposite sides, we're gonna duke it out until somebody wins or we reach a settlement, right? Whereas when you come alongside districts, these district leaders and all of you are focused on ensuring that students get a high quality education. And so by suing a district, you often create this adversarial relationship that really doesn't exist until someone says, we're going to sue you, right? And so one of the reasons why I focus on Title VI in particular is to help people move from Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin, if you take federal money, that is not just something for the school district attorneys to understand. It is not just, okay, there's an issue, let's call the attorney. Let's have them tell us what to do, and then let's go back to focusing on teaching kids. That is actually not how Title VI of the Civil Rights Act should work. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act has broad applicability. So you can see all the various areas that Title VI applies to. It applies to things like grading, right? It applies to career and technical education. It applies to discipline, where we often see disparities in discipline between students of different races and backgrounds. Academic programs, who gets invited to be in gifted programs, who doesn't? Who's accessing AP classes? Which schools have more AP classes than others? All of these are issues that come under the purview of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. In addition, Title VI prohibits two types of discrimination. Intentional discrimination, that means taking action because of a student's race, color, or national origin, or a group of students' race, color, or national origin, and it prohibits disparate impact discrimination. Disparate impact says a policy or practice has the effect of discriminating on the basis of race. So even if you're not race, color, or national origin, even if you're not intending for it to have that effect, if it has that that effect, then that is unlawful under Title VI. Now, I can tell you under the current administration, President Trump and the Office of Civil Rights has indicated that they are not planning to enforce the disparate impact regulation, and they are working on repealing those regulations. However, here in California, you still have the obligation to not just have a disparate impact discrimination. And so I can go in my Q&A time into how the test works and how it's applied. But the important thing is to understand that we can look across policies and practices to see actions that were put in place for very good reasons, but that might be, for example, screening particular students out of gifted and talented, or might be resulting in discipline for some students more than others based on in light of their race, color, national origin. And so it's important that we interrogate our policies and practices to identify when something is having a disparate impact. So even though the current administration has said it's not going to enforce disparate impact, here in California, disparate impact still remains the law of the land. So it's important to understand that. Second, the other thing to understand, so remember I said discrimination is one of the foundational parts of equal educational opportunity. The second part is looking at at the opportunity gaps that exist within schools, between districts across states, right? And so when I talk about opportunity gaps, what I'm talking about is access to a wide array of educational resources. That might be school funding. That might be high quality teachers. It could be extracurricular activities. It could be career and technical education. So when we talk about opportunity gaps, I'm talking about a fulsome examination of how are resources distributed across districts. Because how many of you have been in a meeting where a district administrator or someone else had said, we need to focus on the achievement gap? How many of you have been in a meeting where that's been discussed? We need to focus on the achievement gap. How many of you have been in a meeting where a district administrator has said, we need to focus on the opportunity gap? 1, 2, 3. Okay, a lot fewer, right? So the current narrative often in education is these test scores come out and everyone wrings their hands about gaps in opportunity. Gaps in achievement, right? Look at the test score gap. Look at which students are doing well, which students are not doing well. Look at the gap between white and Asian students, Black, Asian, and white students, Hispanic students. Look across the narrative, Native American students, and see where students are performing at different places. However, disparities in achievement are not organic to our students, right? There are different outcomes unless they're the extreme case of very serious, biological differences that are identified as special needs, with the exception of really those things that are cognitive impairments that truly prevent a child from learning. We don't see achievement gaps because there are biological differences between children for the most part. What we see, the achievement gap oftentimes really is a reflection of the opportunity gap, of the fact that some children get a high quality education and other children do not. And so one of the reasons why we're trying to shift the narrative to talk about opportunity gaps is because the achievement gaps that everyone seems really focused on in education are not organic, and they can be addressed in ways that would focus on who is getting a high quality education. So one of the ways to address opportunity gaps is you want to identify and measure where opportunity gaps are, and that is across the education spectrum. You then want to monitor them, and then you want to close them. So measure, monitor, and close opportunity gaps is one of the ways to take that idea of equal educational, now we're focusing on the opportunity part of that phrase, to say who's getting really high quality, robust educational opportunities and who is not. And oftentimes when you look across the data, what you see are disparities tend to reflect race, national origin. They might reflect rurality, right? Any number of different ways that the poverty is often a big indicator of who's going to get, for example, high quality teachers and who's not. And so when we can start to measure and monitor these gaps and then start to close these gaps, we truly bring equal educational opportunity to life for our students. So here's the part that I'm most excited about. How can all of you bring equal educational opportunity to life? And this is where I'm going to spend the remainder of my time. So one of the ways to bring equal educational opportunity to life is first to ignite educators, districts, entire states really, around the why. Why are we focused on equal educational opportunity, and what are the anticipated results of doing so? Because first, everyone needs to know, and actually Maria did not coordinate that, but when she said that, I was like, oh, I'm about to dovetail exactly with what she said. Everyone needs to understand the why of why are we doing something, and what will our education system look like on the other side of focusing on this why. So we want to ignite people, everyone from classroom teachers, staff, principals, librarians, school counselors, district administrators, the superintendent, the school board. We want everyone focused, sort of moving in the same direction for the vision that you have for the district. Next thing we want to do is empower every one of those people to act. We want to give the resources that are needed to bring equal educational opportunity to life, and then we want to make sure people are trained to use those resources in ways that will help to end discrimination and deliver a high-quality education to all students. So everyone needs to be empowered to act on that. Now notice how different this is from what we too often see today, which is that it's the lawyer in the district, maybe there's even an office of lawyers, a gaggle, if you will, of lawyers who are in charge of complying with the law, right? And they're the ones that people call, like, okay, we had a legal issue, let's call the lawyer, make sure we're doing this right. Okay, great, we've checked the box, let's move on, right? And so everyone's thinking, how can we comply? But what if every teacher in the building understood what equal educational opportunity meant, and that it meant not just non-discrimination, but a high-quality education for all students? What if every school counselor understood that? Every principal understood that in a way that helped to implement this principle rather than merely see it as something that we're trying to comply with? And then finally, incentivizing. So my husband and I have three daughters. One who just got married recently, and then we have two at home who are in high school. And one of the things that we talk about when we're trying to get the two younger ones to do something that they don't necessarily want to do, we might say, if this is done, here's the result that's going to happen, right? And so what we call that incentives in our household. We call it incentives. Now people would say, aren't you sort of bribing the kids? No. We're not bribing them. We're incentivizing them to do what we want, right? And so when we think about incentives, we want to reward what is positive behavior around these issues. So getting understanding about how equal educational opportunity matters in the classroom, gaining understanding around those who are helping to assess if educational opportunity gaps exist, monitoring them, closing them. Those things can be incentivized in ways that get everyone's attention, right? Lots of people will be motivated when we say, this is something we care about, and this is something that we want people to act upon. And we want everyone to be aware of how do, for example, grading practices affect students. How do they impact which students are getting high grades and which students are getting low grades? So for example, I teach at a law school. One of the things that we have at law school for exams is blind grading. And one of the things I love about blind grading is by the end of the semester, I know my students well. I know when the students who are likely going to knock the exam out of the park, and I know the ones who, or at least I think I do, who may not do as well, right? But when I get the exam and they're number 8271, I can't connect that student to their past performance in the class. I can if I have a performance part of the grade, which I always do, but I can't do that for their exam. Why is that helpful? Because I don't bring any preconceived notions into my grading when I'm looking at their exam, right? And we know that implicit bias exists. We know that we can think, oh, this student probably didn't do the best, right? But when you don't know whose exam you're reading, you just apply the rubric and you get the grade, you you give the grades to what they are. And so that's sort of an example of, wow, could we assign, numbers to papers in a way that would enable educators to not know who they're grading, and how might that affect the grades that students get? So that's just sort of one example of how to implement that. But the important thing to understand is that this idea of ignite, empower, incentivize is meant to capture and involve the entire building and the entire district, not just the lawyers or the gaggle of lawyers that are sitting in the district office, right? So I'm going to show you some resources that can be used to accomplish this. When I talk about igniting people on equal educational opportunity, particularly Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, what we did is we created at the Education Rights Institute resources so that people can understand what the law means. When I used to represent school districts and I would go to meet with educators, you could often tell that they were like, when is the lawyer going to be done, and can I get back to teaching my students, right? And one of the things that I want to bridge the gap for by developing these types of resources is for educators and principals and school board members to understand that no, the law is for everyone. Implementing the law in a robust way that really would move how children and students learn is something for everyone to be involved in. And so what we have created is at the Education Rights Institute, we put together reports that explain what does Title VI of the Civil Rights Act mean. And I can tell you we are living in a time when Title VI is being weaponized to say that it means certain things, but at the bedrock of Title VI is that focus on non-discrimination and ensuring equal educational opportunity. And one of the reasons I started working on this well before the current administration is because whether it was a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, it was not understood at the classroom and building level what these laws meant. Everyone is relying on just the district lawyer and not really understanding what does this mean for what we do, right? And so one of the things we did was draft reports about what it meant. But we then took those long and very footnoted reports and we translated them into 2-page documents, all of which you can access on the QR code. So this is an example of the one that we did for educators, which explains what Title VI is in very brief and straightforward language, and then we give examples of how it applies. We then also explain the types of discrimination that it applies to. So it applies to disparate treatment discrimination, disparate impact, if there's a creation of a hostile environment, or you are retaliated against for bringing up an issue of Title VI. And then it gives educators actionable steps that they can take regarding Title VI. So we talk about, one, spreading the word. This law protects all students from discrimination. And then 2, take a look at your own classroom practices and policies and what's happening in your school to think about how are we seeing discrimination occur and how can we do better for our students. And then we talk about talking with your principal about that. And then, of course, we give information on how if there is a Title VI issue that you observe in your building or in your district, how you can file a complaint. In California, it's a district. You have a district process for implementing your state protections. And so that's an important thing to understand, that the uniform complaint procedure that each district has to develop is something where you can seek enforcement of the California protections that really do mirror these protections. We then did the same thing for district leaders. We've taken the law out of some dusty legal books and put them into formats that district leaders can use. And I don't just mean the superintendent. I don't just mean, a deputy superintendent. I mean everyone at the district level and all the school board members, because school board members typically have other full-time jobs, right? They might not fully understand the laws that are governing the district that they're in. And so one of the things we want is for everyone, school board all the way down, to understand what these laws mean and how they can implement these laws in a robust way that can move the needle for students. So we provide them the same explanation of what does discrimination look like, but then we change what it is that district leaders can do, because they're looking at a system. They're usually looking across a system. So we identify the specific steps that district leaders can take to address these issues. As we think about understanding what Title VI means, the other thing that the Education Rights Institute has done is we create short videos, 2 minutes or less, that explain the law in clear, actionable ways. We do that, one, because this is sort of something that's very easy to digest, and two, it's the kind of thing that you could show at a school board meeting. It's the kind of thing that you could show in a meeting with principals, whereas something longer may not get really discussed. Same thing with understanding the difference between disparate treatment and disparate impact. So we explain the difference and what it means and how lawyers love a good 3-part test. There's a 3-part test for disparate impact. But the point is you really, we provide the way of how can you assess when a disparate impact has occurred that's unlawful. The next topic that we've focused on, and I can tell you in Q&A what additional things we have in the pipeline that are coming, is we focused on race, color, and national origin harassment. And we did that because many of you, as I'm sure you know, that harassment is on the rise in schools. It's harassment on race, it's a harassment on national origin, and so we wanted to make sure to address that early. So what you see on this page, I'm not gonna click on any of them because it's gonna take me out of this presentation, but we did a report again, and then we did 2 short videos. One, how do you recognize when unlawful harassment is occurring and a hostile environment is occurring? And second, how do you prevent and remedy it? So we explained all of that. Sometimes we go up to 2.5 minutes, but either way, I promise you, it does not take a lot of your time to educate you or yourself or your fellow teachers, administrators, and others how to understand what should be happening. All right, so I'm going to move to the second part of that robust vision of equal educational opportunity. The first part was non-discrimination. The second is closing educational opportunity gaps. And remember, I talked across the spectrum of a school building, everything from teacher quality to gifted and talented to technology, every aspect of the district. So in the same vein, we created resources that both educators and district leaders can use to both explain, let's focus on opportunity gaps, because the achievement gaps that we've been focusing on are often a symptom of unequal opportunity gaps. And so we identified and created resources for educators and district leaders. And the resources are also going to be available on the QR code. So what you can see is we explain why we do that in a report, and then just like the Title VI resources, we provide a 1-page, both sides, explanation of why is it important to focus on opportunity gaps and how are we defining a high quality education. So we talk about college and career readiness, what that means, and civic engagement, and how schools can deliver that. So we, as I think I've mentioned, we have both on our team lawyers and social scientists, and we work together to bring research about best practices. So each of the things that we identify here are discussed in our report as best practices for focusing on closing educational opportunity gaps. We did the same thing for district leaders. How can you assess and close opportunity gaps? And what you see here is a checklist that district leaders can use to look across their district and identify where do you have opportunity gaps and how can you close them? So that is just a start. We do a much more robust look at that when we work in partnership with districts, but this is sort of a way to bring districts in, right? The kind of thing that you can talk about at a school board meeting in a way that doesn't involve 20 slides and trying to assess what's happening. It's like, this is something that everyone can see. Here are the things we're gonna look at for educational opportunity gaps. In the same way, we created these short videos to explain why we think it's important to focus on opportunity gaps and what a high quality education is. And then our first topical report under this opportunity gap focus has been school funding. So we identified how should you think about school funding, what disparities matter and which don't. And then we have a video that accompanies that. And then we provide some models for how to address closing school funding opportunity gaps again, with a short video that goes along with that. And so when we think about igniting, empowering, and incentivizing educators, what we are talking about is using these types of resources or similar resources that you can put into the hands of everyone in the system, right? Teachers, principals, school counselors, district leaders, school boards, across the board. Everyone is on the same page, and so you're moving in the same direction. So I'm going to just end with introducing you a bit to the Education Rights Institute, which I've referenced several times, but haven't talked as much about what we're doing. So we are very much focused on moving equal educational opportunity from rhetoric to reality. And we work with policymakers, we work with educators, and we work with families to do that. As I mentioned, we do not sue school districts. We partner alongside districts to help them address the two components of equal educational opportunity that I mentioned, non-discrimination and closing opportunity gaps. We create the kinds of easy-to-use resources that I just shared with you, and we bring together both lawyers and social scientists because a lot of times there's some skepticism when a lawyer walks into the room. It's like they don't understand anything about what's happening about teaching. Well, one, as someone who's been in education law for a quarter of a century, I've read a lot of social science about the best practices for teaching, but I'm also smart enough to know what I don't know. And so we also have social scientists on our team who have studied education, both of whom are former classroom teachers, and I brought them on our team to make sure we had that fulsome perspective of the best social science research and the classroom experience. And we also are working to respond in real time to current events. We have 4 strategic priorities, and then I'll end with that. So first, we are amplifying the discourse around equal educational opportunity and the value of high-quality public schools to help people understand the importance of this goal and why it should be the North Star for all school systems. Second, we are expanding high-quality public education by helping educators and policymakers identify, measure, and close educational opportunity gaps that hinder delivery of a high-quality public education. We also are reimagining protections against discrimination, so moving them from compliance to implementation in a robust fashion. Because until now, one of the fallacies of civil rights law has been it's a compliance mindset. We believe it should be a robust implementation mindset. One of the things that you might be very interested in joining us for is a webinar that helps educators understand Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. We are giving that later this month. It will be October 28th. It'll be 1 hour. And if you can't make that particular time, that is EST, I should note, it's 4 o'clock. We will record that. And one of the things I talk with the team about is, as we're doing additional webinars, which we will, rolling back that time so that it will be live for California. I know that's the school day for many of you, but we will be pushing back that time. So some of the webinars will be after school for the West Coast as well. So I'm aware that that's an East Coast orientation that this first one has. But we are also recording that. So it will be available on our website up until the Q&A. We will cut before we go to Q&A. So that is later this month on the October 28th. And then our final priority is obviously to grow and sustain our impact through fundraising and building coalitions among people to focus on the vision of equal educational opportunity that I shared with you. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. This is all of our social media. One of the things, if you found this that you think it would be helpful for your district, we do partner with districts, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that. But the other thing is, if you join our newsletter, you'll receive first when we release new resources. So we have a number of reports and studies that are in the pipeline, and when we release those, we release them first on our newsletter, and then we roll them out on social media. So that's a place that you can go to where you would get, every time we release new videos and one-pagers and other things, when you sign up for that, you'll get them as we get them fresh off the press. I brought actually bookmarks for everyone to have one to have all of the social media on it. I hope you'll follow us and learn more about us. And I look forward to the dialogue with the panelists. Thank you.
Kimberly, thank you for providing the what to empower our why and to do the work. I'm so impressed with all that you have accomplished, and we want to support you and take the tools that you've provided and put them in the hands of everyone in our system. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
Kimberly, take your seat here. We're going to invite our discussants up. Dean Pedro Noguera, who will facilitate. Carla Estrada, please come up. And
well, first of all, thank you. I hope you all don't mind if we're going to go by first name basis, just to keep it friendly. Kimberly, thank you, first of all, for coming so far to be with us, and then for a very rich and stimulating presentation about the law. And I guess I'm going to start by just posing some questions to Carla and to Guadalupe, because as educators, I think you often come up with the limits of the law, right? And so maybe, Carla, you could start by talking about the way Title VI, which you referenced several times, has been used as a weapon against the district in recent years, particularly in the effort to support Black students in LA Unified.
Well, thank you again for having me here with you today. Any opportunity we can share our stories, our journey of the work, and how we can learn from those experiences to empower each other, I think is always a great opportunity. So I thank you, Kimberly, for your message as well. So when you think about the work in LA Unified, we have a strategic plan. We're very clear about what are our metrics of success. We've worked very hard with our community to establish those, including issues around disproportionality or lack of performance for certain student groups. So we have all those elements in place. So we made a very conscientious decision as a school district to recognize that our Black students in our school district were not experiencing the same success that other students were having, and that we had a responsibility to address that. And so again, the community, our school system came together, our board, our superintendent, at the time to say, okay, we're gonna have a Black student achievement plan. Well, in that journey, what we found was that we were doing all the right things for kids. We allocated dollars, resources, training, so on and so forth, the data mechanisms to know if we're doing well. And then after, it was actually during the Biden administration that we received notification from the Office of Civil Rights that they received a complaint. And the complaint was that we were discriminating against other races because our Black student achievement plan just focused on Black students. And so now we had to engage into a process of what do? We understand our moral responsibility, we understand who we're trying to serve, and we're unapologetic about it. But how do we now work through this? And remember, Biden administration, very different. But the Office of Civil Rights told us that they may have something here. They will be able to say that because of Title VI, we are discriminating against other student populations. So luckily, we're able to work with them to identify how do we remain focused on the intent, which was to serve those who needed us most, while at the same time recognizing some of the limitations that we were in. Luckily, what we were able to do was work with the Office of Civil Rights to make adjustments. Let me tell you what some of those adjustments were. So although our resources absolutely focused on our Black students, still does, is it open to others? If somebody wants to go to an HBCU school for a college visit, am I gonna say you can't go? Absolutely, everyone's welcome to go, any kid, it doesn't matter. Does it mean that a resource that was identified due to the data and performance, well-being, many other data indicators to show that our students, our Black students need it most, does that mean if a psychiatric social worker is on a campus for that reason, that if they saw a child who needed their help, they would say, sorry, I'm not gonna help you because you're not a Black student? Absolutely not. Of course, we support all of our students. So that's how we worked through it. We were saying, yes, these resources are specifically identified for these kids because of data indicators that show they needed those resources most. And then we also made sure that we had language to say, but of course, if another student needed this resource, of course, we will be happy to provide that resource. And I gotta tell you that that worked for us to be able to stay under the radar, but we worry every day that that may change. Our data results have shown that our Black students, compared to the state of California, we've closed that performance. We're outperforming any other Black student in the state of California. LA Unified students are performing higher. We're also seeing our graduation rates higher amongst our Black students than other student groups. We're seeing that our AP courses, as a matter of fact, the College Board recognized us because our students, especially our Black students, are taking more AP classes compared to other school districts, and they're passing those classes. So the data shows that it's working, but I gotta say, it's something that we're constantly having to navigate. And it's unfortunate because the same protections are now being used against us.
So before I get you, Guadalupe, I would like to get Kimberly just to respond to that, because now it's not the Biden administration, it's the Trump administration, and they're using Title VI differently. And so does Carla need to be concerned that they might be targeted in a different kind of way now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there is a lot of targeting that's happened under the current administration. So what's important about what LA Unified did was to ensure that resources are available to everyone. And so one of the things that will raise a flag is that even though LA was focused on, we see a group that's really struggling here, we want to help them. Unfortunately, the flip side also happens, which is that we see a group that we're going to advantage, and we just build in systems to do that. And so as districts are thinking about how to comply in this current moment, ensuring that opportunities are available to all is really important. Once that is accomplished, that is, should be the end of the issue of addressing that type of complaint. Now, there's other types of complaints we could talk about, but in terms of designing resources, part of what they are addressing from the Black Student Achievement Plan are certain factors that are leading the Black students to have low achievement. But if you look across the entire district, you're likely to find some other students who are experiencing the same thing. So it might be homelessness. Poverty doesn't discriminate on the basis of race, right? Poverty occurs across all races. Issues of instability in the neighborhood and other things that are students who are saying, I'm afraid to actually walk to school today because there was a shooting yesterday, right? That happens in a variety of neighborhoods. And so it's important to remember that even though a particular group of students might be experiencing more, say, challenges than others, you're likely to find similarly situated students of all races experiencing those challenges. And so the resources that are developed can be available for all students while still meeting the needs of those students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Guadalupe, let me get you into the conversation. You're the leader of the LA Partnership, which was created by Mayor Villaraigosa, over 20 years ago now?
About 17 years
17
ago.
years now. And it was to target schools that were in high poverty areas that had great needs. And so it gets right at the opportunity gap issues that Kimberly addressed. Why don't you talk about the strategy and the effort, and do you think it's legal?
I'm going to answer your question. Thank you for the invite, Dr. Ott. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Kimberly, appreciated your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. This road to get at equal educational opportunity for all students has a history, has been a successive series of deliberate acts. I appreciated you showing Sylvia Mendez in one of your initial slides, because just a few blocks from here is one of the schools that we directly support, Mendez High School, named after the family. And just to double click, you may already know this, there were 4 siblings in that family who the parents tried to enroll. 2 of them were enrolled in their school of choice. 2 of them were told that they needed to go to, quote unquote, a Mexican school. Now, set aside for the fact that all 4 children were fully bilingual, the only real difference is that the 2 children that were told they needed to go over here were the darker complexioned children. It's also important to note that this landmark case in 47, Earl Warren was the governor of California, I believe, who went on to be the Chief Justice of Brown versus Board of Education in 54. So there was some context building through that experience, I think. I think when Mayor Villaraigosa heard loudly from communities in the broader Los Angeles that their children were not getting that equal educational opportunity, there was a desire to disrupt that. And so the compromise, I'll call it, that emerged was, we're not going to have a district takeover here like you might find in other places around the country that are more mayor controlled. We have an independent school district, we have an elected school board, but perhaps we can agree that you will lend a more intensive level of support for a set of schools in 3 communities in Los Angeles, schools located in Watts, schools located in South LA near here, and Boyle Heights. And so our journey, and that number of schools has fluctuated over the years that the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools directly serves. Our role is to lend a more intensive level of support in building the school community's capacity to better serve students. One, to get the opportunity and diminish the gap there, but ultimately to result in better outcomes for students. Fortunately, we're seeing that trajectory come true. And so the expectation around our charge there is to really think about what are the practices that are in place in schools that are providing that kind of opportunity, right? Is the instruction rigorous? Is it standards-based? Is there a staffing issue? What other system barriers might there be that we can collaborate with the broader system on? What ways can we bring in families to engage them to be critical consumers of their children's education? What important community-based partnerships exist that can be part of the wraparound solution and a collective impact in these communities, for instance, are part of the role that we play in coalition with other entities and agencies and the school system. And in trying to create that kind of equal educational opportunity, we've really honed in on a few priorities as a nonprofit organization, which is entirely almost philanthropically funded, by the way, is a focus on really building the professional capacity of the educators. And so we're there side by side in classrooms every single day. We're there side by side with our school leaders on a regular basis. And we're there to help them make sure that they're meeting expectations that have been set out and enumerated on by the broader school system. The thing that makes this, why I think we're seeing more recent acceleration is because we do have a clear strategic plan. We do have clear priorities. Expectations are laid out. And that allows us to really come and work with our school leaders to make sure that they're meeting those expectations and that they're showing traction towards the indicators, that they're gauging success for the students that we have the pleasure of serving.
So Kimberly, I don't want to sound cynical about lawyers, but you did refer to them as appearing in gaggles, and it's usually geese that appear in gaggles. And I think those of us who work with schools know that we were supposed to have desegregated schools since 1954, almost over 60 years now, and we still have schools that on the basis of race and class experience de facto segregation. Mm-hmm. Why should we believe the law is our friend, is an ally in this effort to educate all kids?
That's a great question. I think part of why the law can be an ally is that the law doesn't get you all the way there, but it's a foundation upon which you can build. In other words, law does hearken to first principles, right? Of what is it that we hope and dream for our students, right? And so I think part of the reason, sometimes law is seen as this barrier to what educators might want to accomplish, when really it's in part because we haven't harnessed the law to use it in a way that can proactively work alongside educators to move us forward, right? And so one of the things I'm trying to do with the Education Rights Institute is to shift the narrative on what education law means. If you look at much of education law, the aims of it are very similar to what educators want. We want to ensure students have access to schools, ensure that students aren't discriminated against, ensure that students get a high quality education. And I think part of, thinking about law as your friend is, where can the law sort of provide a way to kind of catalyze what's happening on the ground? And I think it's, as I said, I think it's really been seen as something that people sort of comply with and then kind of move away from. But a more robust vision of it can really energize and catalyze, I think, people. The other thing is, rights are something that people can really rally around. In other words, rights serve as language that can be used to push back when things are unfair, when things are inequitable, when things are, when discrimination is occurring. And I think part of what rights do is they give you that language to say, I am entitled to more. I should be provided what students over here were provided. Or frankly, none of us got what we should have been provided, and we need to change that. And so rights can definitely be kind of a rallying cry that people can look to move the issues forward. But I think it is all about how you do that. It can be used to, it can be weaponized against districts, and it can be used to move forward. And part of what we are doing is pushing back on this narrative of weaponization. And one of the reasons this weaponization is so effective is because people did not fully, on the spectrum of education systems, understand what the law meant. And so now it's like, oh wait, Title VI says that? Okay, then we'll take out all of the Black student, any groups that have any kind of race or ethnicity attached to it. We'll get rid of the cross-cultural celebration. None of that is required by Title VI. But because there was a lack of understanding, that lack of understanding was exploited to say, here's what it says, okay, go do that. It's like, wait, that's not what it says, right? And so this is one of the things that we're doing, is we're trying to say, no, actually at the heart of Title VI is equal educational opportunity, and here are the ways that it should be brought to life. And so we're trying to push back on that distortion of what it's saying to really get to the heart of what the law means. And when you saw the picture I had up there, that was King standing behind Johnson. So, it's not a law that is intended to segregate or harm students. It is really focused on, uplifting all students. And so it's really getting that narrative out there that's really important.
Did you want to respond?
Yes. As superintendent in Portland, Oregon, my gaggle legal team was only 7 attorneys deep, but it was big enough to leverage. I knew in leaving the Golden State for a tenure in the Northwest, I knew there would be a unique challenge there because there were so many vestiges of white supremacy still permeating public institutions, and that includes the school system. And so arriving with a critical lens for policies and practices oftentimes meant working closely with our legal team, but also co-conspiring with other legal teams and community advocates out there to correct for these symptoms, right? The disparate impacts of, and you see it, you know what the symptoms are. It was no surprise to me on my early visits that some high schools had a full complement of advanced placement courses, enrichments, arts, access to real high quality educational opportunity. You would visit schools, you can imagine which pockets of communities were lucky if they had 2 AP classes. Students who weren't engaged because they weren't offerings. And then this, disproportionality that shows up in other ways too, certainly in discipline and in suspensions. The odd thing is when you disaggregate the data and you put it out there publicly to create urgency around, this is not okay. Not only is it morally not okay, but this is when we need to start citing the law around why we need to take certain actions and rethink the way we do things, right? Of course, these were Black students, mostly first graders, by the way, who were being disproportionately excluded from schools. But it allowed me to then put into place an action plan over the coming years to expand wall-to-wall AP classes access wall-to-wall CTE, wall-to-wall visual and performing arts opportunities, build upon not just the 14th Amendment protections around bilingual education, but all the supplemental supports that were supposed to be part of that experience that Title VI also guarantees. Having come from the land of Lau versus Nichols in San Francisco, where as deputy superintendent, I was charged with overseeing those remedies. I knew how far we could use the shield of the law and the protections that our community only needed to refer to make sure we had the air cover to move boldly, despite some folks not necessarily agreeing on the way that we were redistributing resources and putting our attention. And that created a lot of tensions and a lot of personal safety issues and all the rest.
So, Carl, I want to raise a different set of rights to you, because this morning, LA County announced that we're in a state of emergency for immigrant rights. And LA Unified serves large numbers of immigrant students, both undocumented and those who are here legally. The question is, what is the district doing? And what does this order mean for kids and families? And how is the district responding?
Yeah. As Ms. Robinson was bringing up, knowing the law is really important. Because as you can imagine, I'm sure many of you, as you looked at your phone in the morning and all those executive orders were flying through, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what are we gonna have to change? This is where she was saying, you gotta know what the law actually says. Many people who know me, I have a special ed background, know that I don't know every part. I know part A, B, C of IDEA. But do you think when I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do right for kids, do you think that I'm looking, well, hold on, let me go see what IDEA says, and hold on, let me check what the policy and procedures say? Absolutely not. You need to know what the law says, but you also have to know your moral compass and your purpose. And knowing those things really help, both those things help you make decisions. Because when it came to our immigrant students, our undocumented students, we knew that fear was already taking hold in our community. Many of us come from generations that we remember those stories being told, or we experienced those along with our families. So we knew that fear was being felt. We did not want to be the ones to perpetuate it. So we made sure we understood the law. We understood what responsibilities we had. We also knew that we were a city, sanctuary city, that was important to us. Also in the state of California, we have certain laws that require us to do certain things. So knowing what those laws were important. A couple things that we did. One, we really hankered into the fact that in our schools serve as the center of communities. They serve as the center of communities. They serve as the center of communication. So one of the first things we knew is that we needed to make sure our families knew their rights. Our staff knew what the rights were. Our staff also knew what protections, procedures we had in place in case, sadly, ICE may come in our neighborhoods. And we had an experience where they came to our schools for other reasons and intents, but whatever it was still, we knew what they were intending to do. So we made sure that everyone in the system do that, and we leveraged our community partners, many folks in this room. We made sure that they understood what our procedures were, what kind of protections we had. We made sure we knew and how to leverage all of our resources. We have a school police department. How do we use them when we know ICE is in the neighborhood? Things like that, those kinds of procedures were critical. We served as a center of communication. We made sure we leveraged also media, let's be honest, social media, you have to make sure you use that, but all to make sure our families knew, one, they were safe in our schools, two, that there were procedures in place to address any issues that came up in our community, and three, we wanted them to feel empowered with knowing their rights and also becoming a connector to resources. Shirla, many other organizations have stepped up. I know there's a lot of lawyers in this room, so if you want to do any pro bono work, let us know. But the reality is we knew that we needed to leverage people who understood immigration law and could be a good resource to our families. But lastly, we also got adaptive. For some of my families, I knew that sending their children to school was not something they were going to be willing to risk. But we were not going to let them steal our children's education. So we expanded our virtual academy option. Let's create a virtual option. I've had students that have had to be very creative because their families were deported. They're 12th graders. They're so close to graduation. I'm not going to let them steal from them. So we are going to make sure that you can finish your last year of high school virtually. And we have had to be creative about that. All those things are things within the letter of the law. We knew how to be able to navigate it. But I actually think it's going hand in hand and really understanding your moral purpose and organization. And I've been very proud that for myself, our whole entire leadership team, my principals, teachers, there's no concern of the fact that we are here to serve our kids, and our board made sure that our policies and procedures align to that.
Thank you for that. Kimberly, I want to go back to you again because many of us know the federal government is effectively shut down right now. And one of the things that's happened is they've gutted special education out of the U.S. Department of Education, which means, well, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What are the implications of that dismissal of all the staff who are regulating special education at the U.S. Department of Education? Because many of us and many of the educators out here don't know what really the U.S. Department of Education even does.
Yeah. So one of the things to understand, so I used to work in the General Counsel's office at the U.S. Department of Education, but there's also the Office for Special Education Programs. So there's more than one place in the Department of Education that focuses on the needs of students with special needs. The important thing to understand is that even when the federal government is shut down, the rights of students with special needs should continue to be protected. So let me say that again. The rights of students with special needs should continue to be protected.
By who?
By the educators. So this is the educators, school staff, principals that are supporting implementation of individualized education plans need to continue to do so. In other words, the fact that someone in Washington who helps to draft regulations and review regulations about special education is not coming to work right now does not relieve anyone from protecting the rights of students with special needs. It simply means that you're not going to hear probably soon new regulations about something if they were in the works. And one of the things that I did as a lawyer for the U.S. Department of Education was review regulations that we would be proposing, right? So you're not likely to get new regulations right away because the lawyers aren't at work to draft them. But the law, federal law about meeting the needs of students with special needs stands. And so this is part of why I talk about bringing equal education opportunity to life. When the government shut down, it doesn't mean that we're like, okay, civil rights went out the door. Those civil rights really depend on educators in the classroom and staff in the classroom and principals and district leaders understanding students' rights and protecting them and acting on them. And so those students their rights still must be protected. And it is not a defense for any district to say, well, the government was shut down, so we decided not to protect students with special needs. That a judge is going to, sort of give the side eye as we do if the kids do something wrong. That is not how the law works. And so the law, here, you talked about how can the law be an ally. Those rights remain protected even when the federal workers are not showing up. Are you less likely to get, if you have some kind of complaint or something you've reached out to the federal government to get answered, you're going to get a slower answer. That's what's going to slow down. But the needs of students remain and their rights remain intact. So that's a really important thing to understand.
But
Yeah.
then there's still the question of enforcement, right?
Well, but here's the thing. So one, in California, there are state laws that also prohibit
Education code.
discriminating against students with special needs. And so the federal government, under any administration, does not have the capacity at the Department of Education to fully enforce students' rights. We have more rights than we have staff who can enforce them. And so making these rights real for students in ways that protect their access to a high quality education, protect them in getting what's identified in their IEP, depends on educators and principals following through with what you've identified that students need. State law is still, is still fully operational across the country, and federal court for students with special needs, you can go into court for that. You don't need to go to Washington to get a student's rights protected you can actually, you can go into court if you follow the rules in the statute. So you need to understand that those rights still remain and can still be enforced by parents. But here's the thing, we don't want to wait for to sue someone to protect students with special needs or any student. This is why we talk about bringing equal educational opportunity to life. We don't want to wait for a lawsuit or complaint for students' rights to be meaningful. We want everyone to understand what they are and to act on them in ways that lift everyone up, not focus on just checking the box of compliance. Does that make sense?
Can I build on that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know, right now, one of the biggest things that we're concerned about is for meeting the needs of our English learners, knowing that Title III funding may be paused.
So explain what Title III is.
So Title III ensures that we're providing services, English language development and services for our students who are learning English, our immigrant students, and that there's a whole process for identifying who that is. Now, we could wait and say, well, let's see what happens, because if there's no funding, what does that mean? Absolutely not. That's why I said you need to know the law. This is why we haven't stopped providing services. Many people felt when all the DEI, all those executive orders, oh, does that mean we have to stop? Absolutely not. Know what the law says, know what you're required to do, and understand that our purpose of why we do the work we do, to ensure that educational opportunity, that remains our responsibility. So what we're looking at is, what will be that impact? What has been the most essential factors that have worked for our English learners, which, by the way, again, another group in our district who's beat the state in performance on our state assessment. Language development, I have kids who are going from their ELD level 1 all the way to ELD level 4 in 1 year. The efforts, we know what's working for our kids. I'm gonna have to find the funding elsewhere, and you bet you that we have a plan to make sure that we do, because to your point, I'm not waiting for the federal government to tell me that. I'm not waiting for the state of California to tell me that, although I will be knocking on their door for additional funding. But nevertheless, we have Plan B. We make sure that we're ready to serve our kids and make sure that that educational opportunity is there. Because our community wants to make sure that we, during a very complicated time, are being very stable and focused on how we're delivering for their kids. That's what any parent or family would want to know. That's what my staff and my schools want to know. And that's what we have to make sure that we're prepared for that, not to just wait.
And can I just build on that point? So even when Title III funding is cut, the Equal Educational Opportunities Act is federal law that requires students who are learning English to be served. Mm-hmm. It is not a defense in court that the federal government pulled back funding for English learners. You do have to go to Plan B because you have a statutory obligation to serve students who are learning English. And so even though it's hard and you have to, you may have to make some hard choices, you do have a statutory obligation to serve students who are learning English and to help them access the curriculum and learn English so that they can fully access their the curriculum across the board. And so it's tough times when that kind of funding gets cut, but you still do have a legal obligation. So this is going to your question, Pedro, of how can the law be an ally? People can't, when you get cuts in funding like this, it can be like, okay, we're not going to serve these students anymore. No, the law says we have to still serve these students. So let's roll up our sleeves and figure out how we're getting it done. No excuses.
So we haven't talked about DEI, right? Which is suddenly illegal. And both of the efforts that Carla and Guadalupe have described I would think that according to the way the Trump administration has operationalized their attacks on DEI, would violate that. On what legal basis are efforts to address the needs of diverse learners, to equitably educate them, and to ensure they're included, on what basis, what's the legal basis of these attacks coming from the administration? How is it even possible?
Okay, so
and when you think about Title I, which you just mentioned, which is based on the whole idea of compensating for the effects of poverty in this country.
So number one, a federal court enjoined the executive order that says that DEI is illegal. So it's important to understand that a court has said this is unlawful, in part because it's very vague what falls under the umbrella of DEI. And so, number one, a federal court hasn't joined that unless something happened today while I was prepping for this remark. It has been enjoined. Now, that doesn't mean it's not on appeal. That doesn't mean that might not change. All of those things, like I can't guarantee what the Supreme Court would do with it if it goes all the way there, right? But my understanding is that as we sit here today, it's been enjoined. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing is, efforts to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, race exclusive means before this executive order were unlawful. So in other words, we're only addressing the needs of X students. So that has been a concern for a long time, and so that is why resources have to be available to everyone. Beyond that, addressing issues that focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, you want to identify what is the educational need that you're trying to address. Are you trying to help students in poverty? Are you trying to help students who are learning English? Any number of issues that you're trying to address. Most of that does not have a racial component. It has a student-centered component. And a lot of what DEI was trying to do was help students enter schools and spaces where they belong, where they felt included, where they are seen, where they're given those opportunities. And all of that work is perfectly lawful and can continue. So my advice is focus on what are the greatest what are the needs of your students, academic, emotional, social, and focus on those in a way that lifts all students. And there's nothing illegal about that.
This is why we can't be distracted by this administration's interpretations of Title VI. You see it in their Dear Colleague letter where they don't define DEI. And so we do need to just stay focused on what are the needs of the students in front of us to get at that equal educational opportunity.
All right, we're going to open it up. Can we? Yes. I'm just assuming.
I know that people are really sitting on the edge of their seats to get into the conversation. I know I am, but I'm going to open it up to you. There are 2 mics. Please come to the mic with any question and we'll engage our experts. Maybe one of my students from the policy class will go to the mic. Let's see, who's going to be first?
And while they're coming up, just share the demographics, a little bit of demographics of LA Unified. Language spoken, socioeconomics.
So of our, almost 500,000 students, what we have is, 70% of our students are Latino. Good 10% are African American Black students. We are also quite diverse. We also have Asian. There's a good population of our students, which is about 7% of our student population. We also have white students who serve about 20% of our student population. And then we also have our English learner population, which is about 25% of our students. And then we also have students with disabilities that serve about another 20% of our student population. So the diversity exists in our school system. I think the other thing around diversity in our school system is that we're 710 square miles. And so we represent a large part of the city, not just LA alone, but even more than that. And every place has a bit of a different community. So when I have over 1,000 schools that I supervise and support, I'm also thinking about the communities all look different. And so how do you make sure you're meeting the equal opportunity gap in our schools while recognizing every community looks different? How do I do and balance those things? That's why I said you got to know what your focus is. You got to know what your data is showing, because how you're going to support, and I'm going to be honest, sometimes intervene to get that equal opportunity gap addressed requires you to know what your community, who you're serving. It's really important. I learned that in Boston, where I wasn't from there, and I had to really spend time and walk in the community and understand neighborhoods in a very different way than being born and raised here in LA, where I still get lost sometimes, but I know where home is.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Fred Atkinson. I work with children with disabilities. One thought that comes to mind from the speakers and the coaching thoughts that we're getting is how the districts define opportunity. Is that something that can be umbrellaed by the state, or do the individual school districts come up with their own idea of what equal opportunity is? I know equality is pretty much well defined, but in terms of equal opportunity, is that something that the districts can come up with, define, and disseminate to the parents as needed?
I'm going to address that to Guadalupe, because you did that work in Portland, and probably most of the people here don't know the courage that it took to accomplish that. So maybe you could address how you made that transformation happen up there.
Sure, it's an important question. Thank you for it. I think the broader community has to come to some consensus around what that graduate portrait is, right? You see a lot of school systems beginning to engage in a comprehensive process to be really clear about what we define as success as a student outcome. We went through a year-long process in San Francisco to define that. We went through a year-long process in Portland to do that, which is great, because if that's the outcome that we believe defines success, then of course this is where I come in. We do mean success for each and every one of our students, right? So what is it going to take to support students in every single school, wherever they're enrolled, has the equitable opportunity to actually realize that vision for student success? And so it's a range of things: college and career ready, it's exposure to visual performing arts, it's language supports, multilingualism for all students. It's like whatever your community has landed on, it's important to define that, as LAUSD likes to say, that they're ready for the world. So we run with that, right? We want our students to be ready for the world.
How was that district defining that opportunity to learn?
Yeah. Are you saying for me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think that's such an important question. And I think one thing I would encourage folks to think about as you build off of the community engagement is that just the floor, or you have to push yourselves even harder? And I say that to you because when we think about performance, our recent results show not only our Black students, Latino, English learner students with disabilities improvements occurring, but we also saw our white students rise, our Asian students rise, which is great. We're raising the bar for everybody. Let's continue to do that. However, I also know that that's not only what my kids want. That's not only what my families want. That's a basic, our kids should graduate literate, no basic numeracy. Right. That's a floor. And so one of the things that we were noticing is that in certain communities, certain student populations, I was having students who were graduating with AA degrees, graduating with certifications and an industry recognized job career. That's what they want. So I knew that we've got to push ourselves more. So our superintendent, our board, we're launching what's called Dream It, Achieve It. That's our next phase of closing that opportunity gap. Our students want to graduate with AA degrees. They want to graduate already having that college experience. They want to graduate having certifications that give them not just an entry-level job, but did you know that cybersecurity people with a certification can make $80,000 a year? I know I have high school graduates. I know I have students who are having to be the breadwinners in their families want a job like that. So I would encourage us to also think about not just the floor. We got to start aiming really high, and our kids and our families are being very clear that opportunity gap is more than just literacy and numeracy.
And Carla, congratulations on the trend upward for the district.
Still got work to do, but yes.
Yeah, but
yes.
The hard work is evident, so
Thank you.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Chloe Durant. I am a graduate student here in post-secondary administration here at Rossier. A lot of my other students are here with me. And the question I have for you guys, what do you think the mindset for the next generation of higher education administrators be? What kind of skills and values should we have and mindset should we have going forward to really bridge that gap? I know for me, I really think about economic justice for African American girls and not just educational opportunity, just bridging that gap. What other mindsets do you guys think that we should have moving forward?
That seems like a question for Pedro. I feel like we should let the dean go.
Well, the syllabus
let the dean go
reflects.
first. Yeah, exactly. I was like,
Moderator.
Kick this out.
Well, we often hear higher ed educators complain that students are not ready for college, and I would say we have to flip the question: are these institutions ready for the students, right? Are they ready for addressing the full gamut, like what Carla was just talking about, their desires? Right now, we're seeing large numbers of young men, for example, who are not going to college at all because they're choosing to work over college. Are they ready to show them that they can get an education and earn a living to support themselves and their families and make those accommodations? I think there's a lot of change in higher ed that's needed if we're going to make it accessible, affordable, and equitable. And so the mindset is, what do we need to do differently to expand access?
And I'll just add to that. I just wanted to call on you, really. I'll expand on that, which is higher education is really seeing how law is really affecting what institutions do. So understanding what the law is that governs higher education, I would say, is critically important. So for example, educational institutions, post-secondary, have First Amendment rights, right? They have the right to express themselves, and there's case law that talks about they have a right to sort of not just have viewpoints, but also like who's teaching, who they're educating, all of that. That is part of what makes up a higher education institution. And so the law can be an ally. It can be a tool that can be used. You don't have to have a law degree to understand some of the really key principles that make for strong higher education institutions. And so I think one of the things we're seeing in this day and age is the importance of understanding how law affects higher education. And also it can be used to build stronger institutions. It can be used to as a way to ensure that students' rights are protected, professors' rights are protected, but you have to know what those rights are to support them. And so, just a greater understanding of that, I think, is something that people are starting to realize is needed because it's affecting everyone. Yeah.
I think one additional thing I would add is, how is higher education being adaptive? In two ways. One, for the students themselves. I think we all remember when we first embarked on our paths of education, higher education, I thought I wanted to be a dentist, and I totally went a different direction. So being adaptive even then was important, right? So now you can imagine where kids in some cases are going to have to be, or young adults are going to have to carry jobs, may have to pivot because the world around them too is changing so quickly. So I think the word is being adaptive to the students themselves, and knowing that their experiences and what they're going to be going through in a very rapidly changing world requires us to support them in being adaptive, but also knowing that how can the system be adaptive to what kids coming into higher education are going to need? I know we're working on that ourselves to make sure that by the time you get them, they have a mindset of being able to adapt to a world around them. But I do think that that's an ongoing need for college students overall. And then the world is changing so quickly. So the jobs of today they're just being they're changing to jobs that we have no idea what they're going to have to be able to do. And so our students being able to, higher ed, preparing them for that, I think is so important.
For those interested in pursuing educational leadership, and we hope many of you in the room are, because we need you,
Yes.
We know that not only do you need a foundational background in the law, you need content expertise, you need your skill set, you need organizational change management, but surveys from recent school system leaders all reveal you also need this ability to navigate the current state of politics. And so that's not always traditionally a skill set that folks think about in leading a school district, right? Like they think about the instructional work that needs to happen, and that's a key component, but the adaptability, the political astuteness, the context awareness, the awareness of the tools at your disposal that we've been talking about this evening to get at your objectives for your community and the children that you have the privilege of serving.
And I just want to add one more thing, which is that the other thing to think about for higher education is being of service to the community and not being extractive. So one of the critiques of higher education is that, you have a wonderful university and a community, but it's mostly, it comes in, it helicopters in, it studies what's happening in school, and then it pulls out, right? There's a lot of churn for the school itself. So serving those communities, being thoughtful about the research that you're doing, being thoughtful about how you're serving the community in which you're located, I think is part of what makes for a strong higher education institution. Not being extractive, but serving that community is really important.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Irela Perez. Fight on, class of 2005. Yes, former superintendent, now retired. Declining enrollment in the state, as when the school year started, most districts had a big impact. What was the natural progression impact, right? But was there a larger impact for LAUSD due to the immigration rates? And is that still happening? And what is the projection? And how is that impacting the school district?
Yeah, we're very data informed, so I can tell you from looking at the numbers where those kinds of things have impacted us. First, I will say though, this is from the pandemic. After the pandemic, there was a good number of students that we were trying to determine where did they go. They did not return to our traditional educational system in LA Unified School District. So I would say from the pandemic, I think we've also been hit by that still. As we look at graduation rates, for example, in our cohort data, we're noticing, okay, there are some students, especially our English learners. Remember, this was before all of this that's going on with immigration. This was from the pandemic. So it just shows vulnerability is something you always have to just be aware of and know you have to be responsive to. The second is with ICE and immigration issues. This is why I said to you, us hitting the ground hard on communication, being very clear how we're protecting was really important for us. We also, no kidding, asked folks to come back. And when we told our schools, if you know that you have a group of students who are vulnerable, again, we don't want to target any particular person, we said, if you know they're vulnerable for many reasons, including could be immigration, could be homelessness, could be foster care, we want you to reach out to them. So we were calling, we were reaching out, our principals were going to homes, I had administrators going, PSAs, PSW, everyone, the village came together and made phone calls. So have we seen a decline? To a certain degree. But what we really saw was that touch point allowed us to give those families options because they didn't know what their options actually were. So we didn't see a huge decline that's due just to the immigration issues. But I do think we're gonna keep feeling it over time. Because what I'm having families who are going to appointments to talk to immigration officers for whatever things, and now their families are being detained in those meetings. And so now, whatever the status of the child is, it doesn't matter because now you have a family that's now impacted by that. So again, that's why I say to you, adaptive is really my word all the time because I just know that the world is something that I have to be prepared for my kids, but I also know that for us, it's been a necessary action. And so over time, we're tracking that information. To be honest with you, I'm very careful what I share publicly around that for many reasons. But we're responsive, but it is an impact. But I want to say to you, it's not just this. It was from the pandemic as well. Certain vulnerable kids continue to be vulnerable, and we have to make sure we stay focused on those kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. The dean has asked us to work with the National School Board Association to do some institutes for board members. Could you just address what aspect of what we heard today needs to be incorporated into that? I know my colleague, Darlene Robles over there, will be taking notes. This is work we're very deeply involved in right now.
That's a good question. The role that school boards can play in better guaranteeing an equal educational opportunity. Well, having had the privilege of directly with dozens of school board members. Oftentimes, these are folks who want best for their community. They're not educators per se, and so part of our ongoing work is to make sure they have the knowledge base, they have the awareness of what our obligations are, what rights our students have. There are things they can do in this time and place right now, right? Immigration enforcement is going right at the heart of the protections that Title VI is trying to protect, like not creating a hostile educational environment, for example. But school boards and their leaders can take a clear and affirmative stance, on their position, as we've seen happen here in LA. And I think because of the groundwork and the work in school communities reassuring families and supporting them, and working with community on those support, not advertising them for obvious reasons, is why maybe we haven't seen the kind of reluctance that perhaps immigrant families might be having in other communities where school boards and district leaders are not taking as bold and clear a stance. And so we're thankful for that. Many of the schools we serve are the epicenter of a lot of immigrant communities. And so they're feeling reassured that, one, we don't want to disrupt education for their children, but we want them to feel this is a place, one, we can raise your awareness of what's available out there for you resource-wise, but the last thing we want you focused on is, are my children safe and are they learning to read? But school boards playing a very important role here in setting the tone and the policies and recognizing their responsibilities to serve all students, which I thought Plyler versus Doe had already confirmed, but here we are.
I think one thing to think about when we think about school boards is, these are often people from the community who have other full-time jobs. And so I think supporting them and making their job easier to understand the current landscape, to understand when things change, when the law changes, when policy changes, I think that's really important. The thing that I would probably most focus on with school boards is that ignite, empower, incentivize. In other words, helping school boards think about what is our why and what is that vision of a graduate, vision for our district, what do we hope to deliver to our students, and then empowering all levels of the system to act on that. I think it's really important. A top-down vision that doesn't build together, right? Where it's just like, we're telling you to do this as opposed to we're empowering the people in the district to do it, it just doesn't work. And so that empower is really important because it then shows the school board sees every educator, every staff member, every principal as a partner, not as, someone that they're just sort of telling them what to do. And then finally, that incentivize, you have to give people, motivate them to act. And so that's the idea of incentivizing educators and others to really take action on the vision that the school board sets. So that would be the piece that I would most focus on.
If I could add, so in LA Unified, most of our board members, this is their full-time role. So we actually have salaries for our board members. One thing that we found as we were dealing with all the things with immigration was also understanding our limitations as a school district. Because of course, as board members, they're listening to their constituents, they're hearing from their community, and they want such action and such passion and emotion attached to that. That's really hard to now say, okay, what can I do and how do I do it? And so what was great with our board was we got really clear together about what we as a district could do internally, but that there was a heck of a lot more we can do by leveraging externally our community. There were things that we could also do as a community and that they could be such a helpful bridge, whether it was labor, whether it was community organization, whether it was people locally in their communities, because we also understood that by them being a bridge, we could leverage the power of the village to address the needs of our community. So I also think our board members can be really powerful bridges, but I think you have to understand what is a district you can do so we don't get all funding taken away from us, but at the same time knowing we are not limited by what's internal. There's a lot that we can leverage externally too.
Great wisdom. With that, I'm going to pull us to a close. When we started, I had mentioned to you, you would leave with the kind of information that would empower your action. Having knowledge is what empowers. And so one of the things we've come to realize is the importance of making sure the people we are preparing to lead in our systems really do focus on knowing the policies that exist and knowing how to utilize those. So I want to thank the group. Kimberly, amazing job on those tools that you have developed. Maybe there's one for board members too, I don't know.
The district leaders are, I see board leaders as district
They're in
leaders.
there,
Yeah.
okay.
They're in there.
We'll use those tools when we start the institutes. So you gained a lot of knowledge from Kimberly, so I want to thank her personally. Guadalupe and Carla, you made the connections to what really happens when you take that knowledge and you put it into action in schools and in districts. So we thank you. And we always have to thank the best Dean of Education in the nation for his role in facilitating.
Thanks for that, Maria. But tonight, the Supreme Court is potentially reconsidering the Voting Rights Act. That's the announcement. So I just want you to keep in mind that nothing is sacred, right? You can't assume that rights that were won in the past will always be there. And I think that's just important for everyone to keep in mind.
Gotta be ready.
That's right.
With that, I invite you to enjoy the reception and interact with these amazing leaders. This was really a treasure to have them here today. Thank you, everyone.
Don't forget I have bookmarks for everyone. Bookmarks for everyone.
Make sure you get your bookmark.
So should I just have to Francis about this man?